Hi everyone. My name is John Lord. I'm the VP for Business Development at Connexity. Been with the company about 6 years, and I'm here with Benedict from Google. I'll let him introduce himself.
Thank you very much, John, for the warm welcome, and also I'm very thankful for joining this webinar with you, and thank you for the invitation. So my name is Benedict, and I'm an industry manager since more than 4 years now, an industry manager at Google. What does it mean? We usually support all kinds of advertisers, and our team supports CSSs, partner CSSs. And my team is located in Germany. I'm based in Berlin, and now I'm very happy to talk about in general the CSS program, the development of the program, but also, of course, the questions raised by the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks a lot for joining. And before we get into all those questions, and as a reminder, if anybody does have any questions that we don't cover, we've got a packed agenda. If anyone wants to put any questions in the chat, please do. We may not have time to answer them directly in this session, but we hope most of it will be answered by the content in here. But we may need to follow up on some of that. Going into some of the details before we get into more of the Google CSS content, I just wanted to introduce Connexity and who we are and what we do. So we're actually part of Taboola. We're the e-commerce performance marketing part of Taboola. We were acquired by them just under 3 years ago now. We're very focused on helping advertisers grow their new customers and revenues. We work with probably about 1,500 different e-commerce businesses across the US and Europe, some very big marketplaces, retailers, but also direct-to-consumer brands as well. We're a pretty big business. We generate about 4 billion in sales revenue per year from about 1.5 billion clicks. Now those clicks come from lots of different sources, and Google is definitely part of the source. And today we're going to do a big deep dive really into the Google CSS traffic about that we run. But it's also good for those of you on the call to understand that it's just part of what we're doing. We also run the same product content across Taboola's network and other traffic sources too. So getting into the Google piece, getting into under the skin of that really. For those of you who might not be fully aware of what the opportunity is, most of the advertisers that we already work with already work with Google. It's often their biggest paid channel, certainly the shopping ads part of it. And what we do, the CSS opportunity allows retailers to run incremental campaigns alongside the campaigns they already have, whether they're running that through an in-house PPC team or through an agency. What Connexity does is run incremental campaigns. And what we tend to see is, as long as we have the same target as the in-house team or the agency, we can probably get 20% or more volume from shopping ads incrementally on top of the existing team, and that's running at the same target. And importantly to say that these additional campaigns complement and don't compete with existing campaigns. So let's get into the detail of what this really means and go through some of the questions that we've been submitted. And as a reminder, these are a combination of the questions that have been submitted by everybody that's registered, but also some of the questions that we get asked in many meetings that we do. So it's a combination of those two things, and hopefully we'll cover lots of things that are in front of people's minds. So Benedict, do you want to start by telling us a bit more about actually what the CSS program is?
Yes, sure. Maybe a quick intro, and for most of you, probably also kind of a recap of the CSS program. So in general, the CSS program has existed since late September 2017. And with this launch of the program, there has been also a change how an advertiser can place shopping ads on the search results page on Google. Because since then, only CSSs can place shopping ads on the search results page. And that also actually means then that merchants or advertisers can participate only through CSSs, of their choice, and that's also possible then via several CSSs. That will be also one of the questions or topic we will discuss later on. Maybe also in regards to the coverage, it's the CSS program exists in the so-called EEA region and UK and Switzerland, and in total we have 21 countries. There are a couple of developments we've seen in the CSS industry and in the CSS program, but later on that, I assume also at the end of this session. And with that, John, I would also hand over to maybe the first question, or do you have a question in between?
I just wanted to understand really when we talk about your team,
Yeah.
are you representing the Google Shopping Europe CSS as well, or is it
No,
the
it's just
non-Google side?
non-Google side, only CSS partners, as we would call it. And yeah, our team, as I said, is based in Berlin, but there are two more Google teams that even also support the CSS partners from Dublin. So in total, we have three teams that support the CSS partners. And that would also, let's say, give you more insights how important CSS partners are in, let's say, in the ecosystem of shopping and Google Shopping.
Okay, well let's start getting into some of these questions then. So really the first one, so why is it beneficial to actually work with a CSS partner and not just with Google? What are the main reasons?
Yeah. So good question, and we also hear that a lot when our colleagues from the retail teams hear that a lot. And usually, what we see, there are three factors that could decide why it should be beneficial to work with more than or with a CSS partner beyond Google. The first factor is also when it comes to expertise of different CSSs. Some CSSs, for instance, focus on just one category. For instance, there might be CSSs that specialize only in a fashion category, for instance, whereas other CSSs go a little bit broad and cover more industries. The second point is the services a CSS might offer to an advertiser. There are CSSs that only provide the tools, and the advertiser needs to run everything by themselves. They need to upload all the product data. They need to, let's say, face and encounter and solve technical problems, and they also need to, of course, optimize the campaigns. And then on the other side, there are also managed services where, let's say, a partner CSS does everything for the partner, for the advertiser. And the third point, and to look at it, and also a reason why it might be beneficial to work with the CSS beyond Google, might be also the charging model. There are several CSSs with so many different charging models. Some, for instance, charge a fee on the CPC, for instance, the CPC that you pay to Google for a click. But there are also CSSs that are charged or paid by a certain commission, on achieving a certain goal for an advertiser, being, for instance, a revenue goal, being, for instance, a profit goal. So these kind of aspects, I would say, are crucial when deciding why it should be beneficial to work with a CSS partner beyond Google. And we've seen that also partnering with more than Google can also increase the performance. But later, also to that, probably there are more questions on this matter.
Yeah, no, it's great you say that, and it's definitely true that not all CSSs are the same. In fact, the big challenge is to create differentiation in this market. I mean, I think from our perspective, advertisers that work with us get the benefit of our feed enrichment platform, which helps plug the gaps in certain parts of data. Some people have got really good feeds already, but others can be improved through our platform. As I mentioned earlier, and we've got lots of different sources of traffic beyond Google as well, which is accessible for advertisers. And our managed services does help significantly as well, because that's all part of our overall. So yeah, it's good to know that there's lots of opportunities and different ideas for those looking to partner with CSSs beyond Google. So let's get into one of the other sort of big main questions. Lots of people have asked this question. So can we work with several CSSs at the same time? And what are the benefits and what are the risks? I know that certainly some advertisers we talk to believe that there are some risks with working with multiple partners. It'd be great to really get the Google view on this one.
Yeah, another good question. So from our point of view, there are no direct risks involved. Of course, if an advertiser thinks of, let's say, a CSS portfolio they can work with, they need to think of also if they have the capacity to work with several CSSs at the same time. So a team capacity, for instance, and also if the services or the charging models, as I mentioned earlier, are also do they also match their needs, and do they really bring additional value to the advertiser? But that's not kind of a risk. That's just let's say a thought that everyone needs to take, and a point that needs to be well considered.
Makes sense.
Yeah. When it comes to, so that's in regards to the risk. We mainly see kind of the benefits of using multiple CSSs at the same time. For instance, there are 4 main reasons, I would say. The first one is increased visibility. We've seen that across the industry, there are so many CSSs, there are so many different networks CSS might have. John, you introduced, for instance, also, or you mentioned you also the networks you have in your portfolio. And by working with multiple CSSs at the same time, you can increase the visibility across the networks, across also, of course, then at Google. And that's something we definitely see as the most crucial point, the visibility. There are other points also strongly connected to that. For instance, CSSs might also attract different audiences. Thinking of, again, a niche CSS with an own price comparison platform within the portfolio, they attract certain shoppers, whereas broader categories or broader CSSs with broader price comparison platforms, they attract also, of course, a different set of shoppers. And that's also, I mean, strongly connected to the first point, but also a very important point. And when it comes to the benefits of using multiple CSSs at the same time. And CSSs, we've also seen there's many differences when it comes to the strengths and specializations. I mentioned the categories, but also there are many tools, the services I also mentioned, but there are also teams involved, people involved. And the combination of people and tools, that might be a different outcome of all CSSs in the market. And combining, let's say, the different strengths of each CSS that might cater your needs most, that will definitely help also to compare what works best for you. So also thinking of how to tap into let's say into an area and try to get better performance through experiencing or to collaborating with more CSSs at the same time. And the last point, very important, is risk mitigation. Just thinking of, you work with one CSS as an advertiser, and you also might face, or the CSS might face technical problems, then this would lead to no visibility at all, for instance, at Google. And when that's something you would definitely want to avoid when users search for a certain product, and even for your product, for instance. So these are kind of critical points and to think of, and definitely benefits to think of why you should work with multiple CSSs at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think your risk mitigation point is a really interesting one. It's definitely one we definitely focus on with our customers. When advertisers start with us, we typically we own around 12 different CSS domains, and we run 3 per market typically. So yeah, sometimes feed offers can get disapproved by Google on one of the domains, in which case that one might go down and the other 2 are still up. So yeah, definitely it makes sense. Yeah, sometimes there's a problem with the feed, or an update takes too long, or the pricing's incorrect for whatever reason. So yeah, the risk point's definitely important. But I think just to summarize what you really said there, I mean, you know, there's lots of benefits and no risk is really what you're saying here. And to be 100% clear, Google is really recommending to work with more than one CSS, right?
Yes, yes. Always think of what works best for you, for your team, for the business, and for achieving your targets, and try to be more flexible. And of course, everyone wants to improve the performance, and there are so many options out there. So why not try to elaborate those options?
Okay, great. Well, let's keep moving on. I think the next questions was submitted by about 3 or 4 different people. So I think Daphne, Connor, and Melissa pretty much all asked the same question, which was, how do you avoid sales cannibalization between your own CSS and those of your partners? And maybe the other way to think about it is, will actually adding another CSS inflate the bids in my existing campaign? So I think this tends to be the main question that we tend to get. So it'd be great to hear your view of this.
Yeah. So in general, of course, different products from the same merchant might appear in the same ad unit at the same time. So for instance, if I look for running shoes and I see an ad of an advertiser with a specific model, and that's advertised by a CSS I can, in the same ad unit, I can see another ad by the same advertiser, but with a different model uploaded by CSSB. So that definitely exists, this kind of scenario. And this question, we also hear that a lot, is always then asked, and people or advertisers think that, okay, this scenario might inflate also the bids. But the CPCs paid by the winning auction does never increase in such scenario, because also what we make sure is that the merchant and advertiser is never second price against itself. So that's very important, and that's why we say that there is no it doesn't inflate any bids in the campaigns. And I believe, John, you also wanted to show one of your thoughts on this, right?
Yeah, because we get that question in most meetings, and we have done for a long time. And it's really about educating the teams and making sure that they understand exactly how the second price auction works. So we did a 1-pager earlier in the year, which we send out to people, and there was just one image I just wanted to show, which sort of describes how the second price auction works. So on the screen there are 2 merchants bidding for the same user in the same auction, and for the purpose of this exercise, we've got to assume that the advertiser has the same quality score in all cases, and it's only the bid that influences the result, which we know is not true, because there's quality score in the calculation as well. But for the purpose of this, we're just focusing on the bids. So here you can see merchant 1 has CSS 1 and 2, and merchant 2 has CSS 3 and 4. And the bids range from 30 pence to 15 cents. So in this scenario, CSS 1 has the winning bid, but in the second price auction, they pay the next best bid from merchant 2, so from the other advertiser, which in this case is 20 cents. And it's important to say that CSS2, which is also working on the same merchant, the winning merchant, has actually bid higher at 25 pence. But it doesn't inflate the price of the winning bid, because it's only influenced by the next best bid from merchant 2. And this is how the second price auction works. Really, it's a mechanism to ensure that advertisers only pay what's necessary to outbid their competitors, not partners that are working to the same advertiser. So yeah, it's a really important one, and I think again, this whole second price topic is super important, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I wanted to highlight here, written down for the audience, and very crucial also to highlight is that the second price auction mechanism holds true irrespective of the number of CSSs, of the identity of the CSSs used by a merchant, and um, it's definitely needed to highlight that. And what also important to mention is that the fact that several CSSs at the same time can, let's say, own an offering and upload an offering doesn't necessarily mean that, or doesn't mean that an offering is being repeatedly shown in the ad unit. So we also make sure that an offer is only shown once. So what does it mean? An offer is the same product uploaded by the same merchant. And in that scenario, again, the second price auction and does take place, and that means you never pay more for a click on any of this offering.
Yeah.
Again, how quickly how we make sure we do at Google, we do our best not to show this an offering at the same time from or specific or multiple instances of an offering at the same time. And if we see and detect, and if our system detects that the same product has been uploaded by multiple CSSs at the same time, we make sure that only one ad and of the specific offer is shown. So very, very important. And most important probably also that this rule holds irrespective of the number of the CSSs in general.
One of the customers we've worked with actually had a really small feed, had about 12 products in total, and they had their own direct to consumer site, but also sold through retailers. When you search for a very specific product, actually you get lots of different results in the search pages. I think one of the things that we learned from that is it's very important to have multiple images for the same product, because sometimes Google might show the same product, but will show different images of the product, so it shows a differentiated experience for the end user.
Yeah.
Have you got any advice around images per product?
Yeah, we also see the same. We usually say the more the merrier. At least, let's say two. We see an average 2 to 4 images for a specific offer. Why so? Because, as you said, the algorithm it can optimize with more options and optimize on the outcome that is also the end goal of a specific shopping campaign. So we definitely say 2 to 4 is recommended to give the algorithm more options, and also to, as you also mentioned here in your example, to show more options in general to the user.
Okay, no, that's really helpful advice. Yeah, we see some advertisers who only have one, so that's a big improvement opportunity for those ones.
Yeah.
So just in summary on this question, then, you're confirming there's no cannibalization of bids because of the second price auction mechanism. And the main considerations really are that you need to have multiple images per offer. You need to have the resources and time to manage those additional partners. But outside of this, there shouldn't really be any risk to the business. There should be no risk to repeated impressions or increasing the cost of bids, for example.
Right.
Perfect. All right, super helpful. Let's continue. Next question was that we kind of linked to this, right? How many, if you're working with multiple CSS, how many should you work with? What factors should be considered? And I don't think there's a magic equation to this. I think it's often down to testing. But what's the Google's view on how many CSS are right for a given advertiser?
Yeah, to be honest, there's unfortunately, no general rule also from our side and no general recommendation. But as you said, there are factors to consider when it comes to this question and this also the answer for that. The first one is thinking of self-managed campaigns versus also managed campaigns by a CSS. So what do I mean by that is think of how to compare and challenge maybe also the own performance marketing team by comparing the outcome of their performance of their campaigns with maybe also the campaigns managed by a CSS. So that's something I would consider if I would already run a campaign by myself. Then maybe I would challenge my performance team by onboarding an additional CSS. The second one is thinking of the different billing models each CSS might offer. I already explained in the beginning. Think of, again, what you really need. And for instance, if you currently, most of the companies are really struggling with or want to achieve more profitability. So think of if the CSS can also optimize on your goals directly, instead of just translating the billing model, the pricing scheme of a CSS that they offer into your goals. So that's also very crucial. The third point is services. The third factor, services. Again, what additional services are offered by a CSS? Is it just a tool provided? Is it more than that? Is it technical setup? Are there any additional market insights, for instance, coming from a CSS? So what does your team need? And then decide if the CSS that is you talk to, for instance, does the CSS also cater the need? And the fourth factor I would mention here is I also touched on that topic already: niche CSS versus broader CSS that cover more categories. Also, we see that a lot of retailers, for instance, a fashion retailer, I'm back with a fashion retailer here, some would focus on multiple CSSs. One, the fashion retailer can pick a fashion CSS, for instance, that specializes on the fashion industry, and then also another CSS that goes more broad and covers more categories and attracts different shoppers and has a different network. So these four factors, I would say, are very crucial. Again, thinking of challenging your own campaigns, thinking of a charging model, thinking of the services, and then in the end, of course, the industry the CSS covers.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think when we think about the number of CSS, I think there's certainly often a correlation between the size of the product feed and then the number of partners. Certainly, when we work with marketplaces with millions and millions of products, it probably makes sense for those partners to work with more than, say, a brand that has 10 products, for example. But also, I think it ultimately comes down to business strategy as well. You might want extra coverage and visibility on certain parts of your business. So, for example, that could be high margin products, it could be seasonal products, it could be your sale products, it could be certain markets where you want to improve penetration. And to your point around models of working, I think that's definitely also really important. Most of what we do is run on a CPC basis, but also there's other models that we can work with as well that align to the business strategy. For example, some of our advertisers work with us on a profit basis. So again, which products are most profitable? How can we make the most profit for that particular business unit? Perfect. All right. Well, moving on, thinking about measurement. Obviously, measurement's an ongoing challenge for many of us, really. In terms of how an advertiser can really understand how things are performing, how can they check how the CSS is performing versus their self-managed campaign? What should they what questions should they ask? What data should they look at?
Yeah. So here also, again, it depends a bit on the pricing scheme, on the charging model as CSS provides and is optimized on. For instance, if they are paid by a certain fee on a CPC, then of course the CPCs are reported, the clicks are reported. But if that goes then let's say also in a more sophisticated area when CSS also optimizes, as you said, John, on profitability, on generating more profits for a certain product category, then of course there's a possibility to report more KPIs on that, and that would help, let's say, also the advertiser to compare the self-managed campaigns with also the managed campaigns by his partner CSS. In general, what we see is that a lot of advertisers make use of any analytics team, most of the time Google Analytics, and then have the same measurement set up for the different campaigns, self-managed campaigns versus also the managed campaigns by the CSS. And that's very critical, I would say, and also very important to highlight that both parties, if I may call, have the same measurement set up, so that in the end you can compare the performance. You can also compare if the self-managed campaigns outperform CSS managed campaigns, vice versa. So it's here to highlight and to question: do I really provide the same measurement setup and the same setup in general, the same product feed, for instance, to all kind of parties, the self-managed campaign versus the CSS managed campaign?
Yeah.
So that's very critical.
And I think beyond measurement, it's also really important to have the same target, because if the partner CSS has a target much lower than the self-managed campaign, you can't really compare it. And so ideally you'd have the same target for both campaigns, same target, same measurement, and then you can truly compare exactly how it's performing and the impact of it. I think talking about measurement, I think it's also really important to measure the same in the same way. So unlike quite a lot of partners in the ecosystem, we have our own measurement platform. We have our own pixel and technology, which helps us see all the transactions that we're involved with. It's a first-party data pixel. Plus, we have an integration with GA4, so we can take the data directly out of the advertiser's GA4 interface. So when they look at our performance, that's what we're optimizing to. And beyond that as well, making sure that the UTM tagging is done really, really well, and making sure that all the correct parameters are there. So the CSS partner can differentiate itself within Google Analytics from the direct activity. So I think there's quite a lot of checks and balances to get right when we have those conversations. When it's all about measurement and setup, and even if it might take some extra hours or even days to get those steps put in place, I think then you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
Thinking further into measurement, we had a great question from Annie on the call, really about incrementality. So is there a way to prove that CSS partners are incremental and not stealing in-house activity sales? I quite like that, stealing in-house sales. Hopefully nobody's doing that, but the incrementality question, I think, is a really important one. What's your view on this one?
Yeah, very important. And I would say, and what we can see at Google, there are two options to look at incrementality testing. So either you do an experiment or you do an analysis. And an experiment could be, for instance, a geo experiment where you say a certain country, a certain region might see products from CSS-A versus another country or region sees the same products from uploaded and managed by CSSB. So that's, let's say, when it comes to geo experiments and experiments in general, what advertisers sometimes do. But this is always in line with a strong collaboration, and this also entails a strong collaboration between the performance teams, analytics teams in general, and that's also what we see for the other second option when you think of incrementality testing, the analysis. So what we also see is that advertisers run so-called causal impacts analyses. And that's not specific for shopping ads and shopping campaigns only, for any kind of marketing channel, but this causal impact study is just an analysis of pre-post event and also the development of the KPIs prior to, for instance, onboarding a new CSS versus running 2 or 3 or many CSSs at the same time. So these two options we see, but in general, that's always there's a strong commitment needed from several teams within a company. So I would say for more sophisticated advertisers, these two options are available, and that's what we see that are also used. Is that also something you would see, or is there anything else?
Yeah, I think it comes up from where we see advertisers that have incrementality as one of their core marketing pillars. Then certainly the geo-testing is something that we've certainly done with advertisers. That does mean that certain parts of the country are sort of turned off for a given period, and the larger the advertiser, the shorter that period. So we would, if it's for a really large advertiser, that probably does make sense. I think for smaller advertisers, we'd probably recommend making sure all the measurement is set correctly, first of all, and that we share things like auction insight reports, and also Google Analytics data before sort of embarking on a sort of full geo test, because for smaller advertisers, those holdout groups can take a long time before it reaches statistical significance. But certainly large advertisers do it often as part of their best practice, and we support that as and when it comes up. But and I think quite often the first port of call really is just to provide some of the insights from Google, share some of the videos on YouTube which we send around to people, and run things like this webinar talking about really the benefits. I think we are at the end. We're dead on time, so it's now 11:45 UK time. First of all, I'd just like to say, thank you to Benedict for joining. It's been really helpful to get those insights from you. I've learned a lot, super helpful. And thanks for everybody who joined. We had a load of people register and join. Great to see so many of those actually make it. So thanks again for everybody to join. And if there are questions that we didn't get to cover, please feel free to email me directly or connect with me over LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions that we didn't cover, and we can go from there. And everybody